Dad.
Hey.
What's up? New location, new spot. This was actually the same spot that I filmed our first PS episode, or I guess our first PS segment. We want to start including just little tidbits of information, what's on our heart, advice, whatever it is we're going through, just our musings and our thoughts throughout the days and the weeks that aren't just, we can't capture that in our typically 1 hour podcast episode, just because you and I are usually all over the place. So yeah, our PS segments will be coming weekly, and it's just going to be Dad and I sharing whatever it is.
We're just trying to provoke thought.
Well, if it is, I think though, if it is advice, it's advice that we're saying to ourselves a lot of the times. It's the stuff that I know for me that I'm learning in real time. But yeah, so we're at this little mountain bike park, and it's a beautiful, hot Mississippi day.
Mm-hmm. It's 10 in the morning and it's 140.
Yeah.
And 100% humidity.
Ooh, sweating.
Yeah.
How are you doing, Dad?
Don't ask me that ever again. No. People have asked me that all week. Hey, how you doing? And they expect to go, great. But I'm going, I'm okay. Which is kind of one of the themes we're talking about today, which is new ground. It's kind of like, I guess I could tell a story about boot camp now, right? Or should I wait?
Yeah, you could tell that.
Well, picture this. It was a November 3rd, 1974. I was standing in the Will Rogers International Airport in Oklahoma City. Forget what gate I was at, but I was 19. It was November in Oklahoma, so it was cool but sunny. And my parents and my little brother was there to see me off. Gone through the process of getting inducted into the United States military. So they put us on a plane, 15, 20 other guys from that area and myself, on a plane to Great Lakes, Illinois. So we get on the plane, we fly all the way to forget where. When they stopped, we ended up in O'Hare. By then, it's dark, and it's not, it's not cool. It's below freezing. It's like 20 degrees.
Frigid.
And they march us out to this military school bus. Looks like a school bus, except it's not yellow, it's gray. And we drive from Chicago to Waukegan, Illinois, where Great Lakes Navy Training Center is. By then, you're disoriented already. You've been traveling all day, and they dump you out on the marching field, start screaming immediately. And we're just, we have hair down to our shoulders, and we're 17, 18, 19, and they start screaming. They're trying to get us to march, but we have no idea how to do that. So people are stepping on the back of your heels, and they basically start taking away your identity, take all your civilian clothes, give you a box, stick this in this box, and write a letter to your mama. And by then it was midnight. 4 hours later, they're in there screaming and hollering.
And they shave your...
Well, we eat these breakfast, which is green eggs, because it had so much saltpeter in it. I'm not even sure what that is, but it doesn't sound good. And then they march you over to get your uniforms. So you can tell you're really a newbie because you still don't have your uniforms yet. I said they took away most of our clothes. I take that back. We got our uniforms that night before, then we put them on in March. First place they take us is the barber. And these dudes have been given buzz cuts for like 25 years.
Yeah.
So they shave it, and I saw guys, grown men, crying, shave your head down to nothing. And then you can tell you're new again because you're the guy that's got shaved hair. You haven't been there for 8 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Marching you around in the below freezing weather. All that. We do that for 2 months through Christmas. It's graduation day. We're in this big, humongous marching field, but there's like 1,000 of us in there. Been through hell, learned how to march, learned how to tie knots, shoot weapons, show respect, learn how to act as a team, work as a team, got tear gassed, got all kinds of shots. all that. Whole point of that is to get you to act like a team. And so it's hell. But on that last day, when you march out of there, we are celebrating. I almost cried. I remember almost, tears coming to my eyes because one is I made it through it. Before I was just a scared kid, but we made it through it and we knew we could work as a team and we knew we could go do other things. But it took all that hard stuff and facing fears by yourself and as a team to get there so that you could go do the other stuff. You couldn't do the other stuff without going through that. That's to me, a real picture of how it is in life sometimes. Probably all the time.
Yeah, I think we're constantly learning and growing and going deeper into whatever it is that God is trying to show us. So yeah, that's a good image. So, okay, so we're talking about new ground. We both, I feel like it's interesting where we're both at in our lives. Someone who is, you've been walking with Jesus for how long?
53 years.
Yeah, 53 years, dang.
Half a century.
Yeah. And for me, it's like, 2 years? I got baptized. Well, I got baptized last year on January 1st, 2023. But yeah, so where we're at in our faith, it's interesting because we're coming from completely different perspectives, but we're both definitely, walking among new ground, and there's resistance to that. There's, emotional distress. There's questions, there's all that stuff. So we wanted to just dive into that about the journey that we're both on. I just think it's neat that we're both in it.
Yeah, I think this is just an aside, which we can talk about later, but I see your generation, i.e. millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha, the power of God is that he has amped up and ramped up the learning process with you guys. You still have to go through it. I could be wrong about this, but it seems to me that y'all have had a reaction to baby boomers and the ones that came before them of us kind of settling sometimes and just it all being about money and career
Progress
and all that. And we realizing that that's not working for us.
Right.
And so you guys have, I think of you, I think of Bo and Rachel, I think of one of my friends named Putty Putnam, people like that, Jenny Sasson, who God is really using. We are in the same place. My point, the point is we're in the same place. You got there quicker than I did.
Mm-hmm.
Took me a lot longer, but your mom and I set a foundation, albeit flawed, for you to at least understand how God is in our lives and who he is in our lives and all that.
Yeah, I think there's this passion and this hunger I see with my generation and younger of people who are really wanting to grow and wanting to go deeper into the meaning of life and our purpose.
Purpose is good.
Yeah. What is our purpose and why are we here and what are we doing? So,
well, can I ask you a question about that? So we're talking about new ground. Talk about that term new ground means to you. We can go there first and then talk about resistance.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's, a lot of it was the breaking down of false narratives or ideologies or stories that I had built my whole life on.
Mindsets.
Yeah. And yeah, literally starting anew. So I often almost always reference my Port Angeles era. I think that time and that season in my life was a lot of God and I rediscovering that ground, like looking, daydreaming, coming up with blueprints, and it was destroying the old. It was a lot of breaking down, a lot of the unlearning. And so it was almost like I had built this whole house that was super pretty and comfortable and great. And from the outside looked like everything was fine. In Port Angeles, like all of that came crashing down.
So was that on the foundation of sand?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And so then in that time, it was a lot of reimagining what life can be like when I surrender to God and not fight, And that was the time in my life when I stopped swimming upstream. I had a distinct like aha moment over the course of this I guess 5-year journey, but I have a memory of being like, wow, I'm not fighting anymore. I'm not swimming upstream. Most of my life I was swimming upstream. I was fighting and resisting the calls and the pulls of my heart, I guess.
Fighting, going upstream, and so sometimes when you're walking with God, it's flow, should be flow. And you and I read a book by Richard Beck.
Yeah. Hunting Magic Eels. Right?
Yeah, a good book, by the way. But he talks in there about deconstruction, but more importantly to him was reconstruction.
Mm-hmm.
So if you deconstruct it and your house comes crashing down because it's not built on rock but on sand, what has God been doing with you in terms of reconstructing your faith and your relationship with Him?
Yeah, I think he's taking every facet of my life, you know, body, mind, soul, spirit, emotions, and he's breathing life into all of that.
Be specific.
I think it's like my heart posture has changed.
Mm.
And again, it's not, I'll have certain thoughts. I'm trying to think of something specific, but I'll have certain thoughts or questions or just like areas where I'm like angry at God or like, why would God do this? Sometimes I think it's a big freaking mind F.
Mm-hmm.
I literally don't have another word for that, but it's like, why God would you make us like this way? The example we were talking about earlier was like, as humans, we're naturally made to change. That's like the most constant thing about being a human is change. Yet it's the very thing that we always resist. So of course I put that blame and the onus on God. I'm like, God, why would you do that to us? Like, why? And so I used to, when I would have those kind of why questions or those moments where I get pissed off at God or the church or like how I see Christianity set up, or you or mom, whatever. I typically would that's where I build those walls. I put one more brick on there, or I run, I just run and I'm like, oh, whatever, I'll just deal with it over here. And so that's where I think God is changing me is it's like pressing into those questions and not being scared to like go deeper into that.
How is that showing up in your life? Tell me some stories about how that's happening.
I mean, prime example is like I just spent 4 days at a youth conference with over 300 kids. And if you would have told me that I would be doing something like that a few years ago, I'd been like, yeah, right. That's stupid. I didn't grow up. We didn't really do that. Like I never went to a Christian youth camp. Well, and I just, been turned off to that kind of stuff for majority of my life, So to be open to that, it's like I'm surprising myself with the things I'm saying yes to.
Mm.
And it's not even like a begrudgingly, yes, fine, I'll do it. It's like, no, I want to. It's this hunger and it's this like, I still judge. I can be critical and harsh sometimes. And I'm seeing the softening of those areas in my life where, okay, like I can go into this with all my baggage and all my preconceived ideas, or I can, this is an opportunity and I can go in there and see what it's all about. It's facing, I think facing a lot of my trials with starting this business. Like old me would have quit 6 months ago.
This podcast.
Yeah, totally. This is definitely a good example because I do struggle with that perfectionism and I want to know and be good at something right away.
Trust me, I know.
I don't have a lot of patience in that area.
Well, I was thinking of our friend. She was talking about a situation in her life where she's dialoguing with God and going, yeah, God, I don't want to do that. And it was like in her thought process, he was thinking to her, yeah, I know that. But would you do it for me if I asked you to? He wasn't being a hard taskmaster. He was inviting her and is inviting her to let go of things that maybe that he wants from her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's the beauty, I think, about humanity, being a human, is that we can, like, be in those paradoxes and still say yes, even when it's uncomfortable. I mean, Darby and I had a really tough conversation last week about where her and I are at in our journeys, and to be in that tension together and to feel that and talk through it with people that's like not part of my, like, that's not something I typically do, is like go into the discomfort and go into the conflict, and because it's scary and it's vulnerable and it's hard, and so I do resist that.
I see you doing it in other
Yeah.
areas.
Yeah, well, and
Your athletics and your hiking and your adventure stuff, you will push yourself.
I mean, that's something I started gaining awareness with myself in that regard of, like, okay, with all these adventures in my life that I plan, these things that people are like, you're crazy. Why are you doing that? Especially, why are you doing it by yourself? But I thrive in that environment. And I started asking myself and started praying, like, I want to see that mentality and that drive in every areas of my life, not just like on the adventurous side. God, can that come through in my profession, my career? I've never
Relationships.
Yeah, relationships, and being friends with people I normally wouldn't be friends with. Like, where I want, I could easily write people off for certain things. I also love seeing the differences, why people are so different from me, and it makes me curious about the the divine creativity of God. So I think a lot of that too is just, it's God at center versus me at center, and
That's really good. Talk about that.
that's just been a big shift. Like, that's again was part of the deconstruction and reconstruction in my last chapter, was reorienting everything and putting God at, another example would be like, God is my north,
True north.
yeah. And this weekend, a lady used that reference and as a compass, and, like, you can't, when you're out in nature in the wilderness and there's no path, you can't just look at your compass one time and be like, okay, that's north, let's go. Like, you constantly have to be checking in yourself and with the direction. The terrain is so different, and we only have that perspective sometimes right in front of us, yet we also have the ability and the gifting to step beyond that and say, okay, yes, I'm right here, and there's this mountain right here, or there's this river crossing right in front of me.
Yeah.
And I know that this is going to be tough to get through, and, like, to have the perspective of, like, it's growing me and it's teaching me.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think I'm gaining skills, everyday skills, through my carpentry, through us, with this podcast, or building our coaching business, like, where it's like, okay, I'm insecure right now. I don't know what I'm doing. And it's like, I used to, again, like, beat myself up for that, but I'm learning. It's like, hey, you've never done this before.
Well, and it's the slow work of God. Our American mindset is make progress, get there now, do it, do it, do it. We got to move the needle, blah, blah, all this stuff. But really, God's work is slow.
Mm-hmm.
He's not in a hurry. I mean, it's infinite. And so as he's teaching us, I mean, I hear what you're saying. It's the wall. And in the critical journey, there's stages of spiritual formation and growth. And when you hit the wall, or when you come to the wall, maybe you hit it, maybe you just come to it. It's a place where God is getting ready to show you new ground, new growth, new learning. And you can't go around it. You can't skip it. You can't go over it or under it. You have to go through it brick by brick. And that's where I'm at. And it's even really hard to articulate, having to let go of my preconceived notions about who God is and what he said to me and what I think I know about him, and letting him teach me about him and who he is.
A lot of us, it's like, okay, we can talk about the what and the why and all that stuff, but the how, like, how on a practical daily basis are you facing these things?
For me, I think I'm right about people's attitudes and the way they project themselves. And I'm learning about myself that I justify my being judgmental and call it discernment and call it, I'm judging something. I'm observing, but this is the how is when you feel those things or when you discern those things, stop and pay attention to what you're feeling, what you're sensing, and then ratchet it back. So for me, and you may or may not be able to notice this,
It's just by me.
what I'm practicing now is when I feel like I've got to make a point, I stop, I lean back, and I lower my voice. That's the how. And it's practice. I don't do it every time.
Yeah.
I have a friend named Bo, and he and I are very determined in what we believe. Sometimes we disagree. And the growth opportunity is Bo doesn't think you're stupid. Or even if he does, you're not stupid. You know, he doesn't. But I don't have to make a point just to make a point.
Mhm.
The new ground is I want you to learn how to build relationships with people that are hard to build relationships with.
Yeah.
Um, even in my marriage, mom will still say sometimes, I don't need you to fix this.
Right.
I just need you to listen. So that's the how.
Well, something I thought interesting you brought up before was that vision one of your friends had for you when they were praying. Because again, we've been talking about this whole concept of new ground, and I feel like for me, I always love getting into like place and our connection to place, and so I feel like the ground is a great metaphor um, in so many different ways. But yeah, so
Trish, who's kind of a mystic, real contemplative, real prayer. She's an intercessor. She was praying for me.
mm-hmm.
And she said, I see these hands in dirt, and they're like God's hand tilling up the dirt. What I see that as is it's the dynamic between my will and God's will. Am I going to let God till me, turn the earth over for new growth, which has to happen? You know, Jesus talked a lot about soil and seeds and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's, are you going to release the need to be in control and right and all of those things?
Yeah. Sorry, I have this image and it's like, I see like every human being, I feel like it's like we have our life and there's this dirt, rocks, things just get
Layers.
sprinkled on there and then they get packed. They get packed and then it rains and it pours and then there's the elements and stuff like that. It freezes over, and more dirt, more dirt. And it just gets so packed. If you think of just the season of winter and what that is doing. And then just this really raw like image of the tilling. It's literally like breath is being like oxygen is literally being it's aerating into those compacted, pressed down.
We have to rip it up, right?
And you think that they're stable, and you think that that it's like hard ground, but then you till it up, and you're like, oh wait.
Or you add water.
Right.
You add enough water to that, it becomes a mudslide. This is very destructive. It can be.
Yeah, that's true.
But fallow ground is, farmers have these hooks that when they're going to planting season, they just rip the ground up before they actually create rows. I don't know the lingo, but before you actually plow it, you've got to tear it up so you can plow it. You've got the discs that you put in the ground to create the rows, and then you plant. But there's a whole process to that. And sometimes we just want to stick a hole in the ground and plant a seed, and that's a recipe for really death.
Yeah.
You have to do the work, and we get resisted.
Yeah. Yeah, I watched this interview with a guy talking about this one time about a tree and how you have, equal forces of a tree growing up and a tree growing down. So there's these layers and this depth that we don't see that this force is going towards gravity. It's literally like in the dark, in the depths of the earth. It's cold. You don't see that. The only part we see is what's, the light. And you have this opposite opposing force, yet the same body that's going towards the light. That's, it bears fruit and everyone sees that part of it. But no one, I think what we're talking about is that growth that happens underneath, like where you don't see, like no one sees the inner everyday practices of creating spiritual disciplines of the
Relationship.
and the fighting and the wrestling and the things that happen again in the dark, but those we have to be rooted. Bo talks about that a lot.
Yeah.
He's growing those fruit trees, and if a tree bears fruit in the first season, that's not a good thing. It's not strong enough to, it's going to grow
Takes time.
fruit. Yeah. And so you have to actually cut those fruits off to allow the energy to be put back down into the roots and for the roots to be able to grow and find nutrients and find stability,
I wonder if that's what Jesus meant when he was talking to the religious people that were in his context.
Mm-hmm.
He said, you guys are whitewashed tombs because you're dealing with everything on the outside and you're not dealing with your heart.
Right.
And so,
yeah, it reminds me of what he says about fasting and not doing it publicly and not like, a lot of the Pharisees would be in public anguish about their fasting. And it's like you build that stuff, not for show, but it's between you and God. And so there's there's not like, we're used to reward. We're used to
instant fix gratification.
yeah. And just to get the applause and to get like, oh yeah, like it feels good to have the external validation. Like, yes, it's great.
It's not bad.
Yeah. It's nice to feel like for people to notice that you're doing a good job and for people to say, hey, you're doing a good job.
I would challenge you to check this book out. It's just, if you're a creative person in any way, I think Stephen Pressfield really captured some really good spiritual principles in here, and I'm not even sure he knew that he was doing it. But he says there's an enemy. There is an intelligent, active, malign force working against us. Step one is to recognize this, so awareness. This recognition alone is enormously powerful. It saved my life and it will save yours. But he talks about in here, on the field of self stand a knight and a dragon. You are the knight, and resistance is the dragon. And then he talks about what resistance is. Resistance is invincible, it's insidious, it's impersonal, it's infallible, it doesn't sleep, it's not out to hurt you or harm you, it wants to kill you.
Yeah.
But also the enemy is me sometimes. So it's learning how to discern what is me and what is another force that's aligned against me. And then learning the how is, okay, if that's true, how do I fight resistance? And the opposite of resistance is assistance. And Jesus said, it's good for you that I go away. I need to go away because I'm going to send the Holy Spirit, the pneuma, the wind of God, the power of God, that will comfort you and give you power. That assistance that we get is God, and he invades the natural world to show us how to walk in intimacy with him. To me, that is the journey. Learning, Jesus came like he promised.
Yeah.
Said the good news is repent, the kingdom of heaven is near, it's right here, it's at hand. And then he said as he was leaving, love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, love your neighbor as yourself, go make disciples or apprentices, teaching everything that I've commanded you, which was what? To love one another, to love God, to love your neighbor as yourself. Okay, that takes a whole lifetime, in my view, to learn that. That's the constant learning. And that's why I think we get resisted so much.
Talk about like the enemy part of you being the enemy, because I think it's hard because our cultural context is, if you do anything that is different or fights your own will of doing what you want, I feel like there's this rhetoric of like, you're not being true to yourself.
Right.
You're it's like bad to like say no to yourself.
You said it a couple of conversations ago. Freedom isn't being able to do whatever you want, whenever you want. Freedom is the ability to actually say no to yourself.
Yeah.
And to me, to your question, it's an example of this is a decision tree that I used to use in my head when I was talking to somebody about growth. If it was a do or die situation, and you had to do it or not, you would die, what would you do? If you couldn't do it, that would be a matter of ability. If you said, Jay, go climb Mount Everest with this backpack that you brought, I couldn't do it. If you asked me to run a 5K right now, I could not do that. I would pass out halfway there.
So that's
the ability. I don't have the ability. If I could do it, but I won't do it, and I have excuses about why I can't, then that's motivation. What I mean by that is I can't run a marathon today or even a 5K. But if I get motivated, which is the how do I get motivated to do this? If I train for 6 months, I could run a 5K.
Right.
So it was a matter of motivation. People that are paraplegics do 5Ks.
Right.
People who are blind, climb K2 or Mount Everest. So it's a matter of desire and motivation versus ability. And I think the enemy for us is we sabotage ourselves and then blame it on somebody else or something else.
That's
what I mean by it.
Well, we don't have a lot of skill. I mean, we've talked about this before. Most of us were not taught about how our body works, about how our mind works and our emotions works. Like we have enough like knowledge right now to have a really solid understanding of emotional intelligence. I think the thing is it's not just about the knowledge, it's about the application part of it. And it's about, for me, like what I'm learning is that there's only a certain point that I can go to by myself. At some point, I have to trust that God is intervening and going to give me like the supernatural strength to get there. It's me, I guess, succumbing to the idea, maybe not as the idea, but like the person, the person, like that there's a being that I need, I mean, like my getting out of just the lifestyle of partying, alcohol and drugs.
How did you do that? How did you get out of that?
I physically we've talked about this. I physically had to get out of it. I didn't have the strength or the willpower on my own to sit there and still be around my friends who were partying and drinking and all that.
So wait a minute. College level elite athlete, your coaches said, you can't teach somebody to be fast. You can teach them to be faster. Hillary's fast. So you had this innate God-given skill and you practiced, but you didn't have the discipline to not drink?
No, because I think there was that's an evolution, because there was a time where I knew I didn't want that, but I saw a future without that, but there was still the side of me that actually still, I don't know if it was like I didn't care or I still did want that. Like I still did.
Did you want to be accepted by your friends too?
Yeah. And I think a lot of times that outweighed the desire to change. I wanted to be included, I wanted to be, I smoked but when, it was weird because like for, I don't know, a decade, I guess I smoked, but like, it was never something that when I was by myself, I often didn't have a desire or a pull to do it. Like, I don't think I was like really addicted. It was just when I was like in the moment, and I'm definitely a person who is like, when I'm in the moment with you, I'm in the moment. Right. I'm 100% there, not in my head. Like I'm there. And so when I was in those moments of partying, like I was just there. So like that kind of had power over me to where it's like, yeah, I would smoke. I didn't really care to, but there was something about getting to go out on the front porch on the couch with everyone in the wee hours of the night and smoke cigarettes and tell stories. Like I always liked the experiential part of it, not necessarily.
There's the relational piece of it.
Yeah.
And how that brought you all together.
Right. And yeah, so like, I could say the same with the hookup culture. Like there were so many times where I would be going out with people and I didn't want to go home with them. Literally did not want to. Knew it wasn't good for me, knew what it led to, knew the feelings of after the aftermath of that. And I still couldn't say no to myself, Yeah. That was years of like trial and error and like
So talk about that though, Hillary. when
Yeah.
you started that process, did you ease into it?
I think it just, I had to, it was that constant falling forward into love. Like, okay, I messed up tonight. I didn't do it tonight. Like, I could have just been like, okay, see, I can't do it. After the 100th time of trying not to do it, I'm still doing it. Whatever, throw in the towel and let's just go back to what I know. And I think where something in me, something bigger than me, was still pulling me. And I think it was love. I think it was God. I think it was the Holy Spirit that was pulling me, regardless of if I messed up, regardless of if I still couldn't get it. Was I didn't just throw in the towel. It was like I just.
But what did you do? Did you like stop going to places where that was going to be a struggle, or what'd you do?
I mean, I think, like, practically speaking, it's like, definitely it's okay. Yeah, it's like I stopped. I remember when I moved to Port Angeles, I made a conscious effort that I wasn't going to make the bars my homes.
Okay, that was a stop.
Right.
What did you start doing then? You stopped doing that, but in the positives perspective, which stopping was positive, but what did you start doing instead of that?
You know, I started putting more of that energy into planning, like, adventures, weekend
Doing
adventures.
the things that were not in that.
I mean, I played pickleball with, like, 80-year-olds. Like, I've talked about this before. I started going to city council meetings. I started finding areas that that I was passionate about.
Got into pottery, I remember.
Yeah, I was going to pottery once a week. I was having craft nights. I was hosting book clubs with friends. Like,
You were already praying, right? Or
yeah, I think that at that point, like, meditation was big in my life. I mean, I was meditating every day for at least an hour, every morning. I mean, and I did it, like, religiously. And those moments of being quiet, of being still.
Revelation.
Yeah, I was reading scripture. I didn't understand a lot of it. I had a friend recommend, my friend Lindsay recommended the Message Bible, which it's paraphrased, and so it's doesn't have the religious jargon that I couldn't stand. So I had that. It's more like, I feel like it's more conversational. So I was reading that stuff, but I didn't understand it. Like, I would read stuff and I'd be like, this makes no sense, but I would still read it. Like, again, I think I started letting go a lot of, like, having to logic everything. I do like to be in my intellect, and I like to study and all of that. But I was getting to this place where that I didn't have to understand something. I could still to be doing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So we were talking about the how,
Yeah.
resistance and new ground.
A lot of it too, I think, like, sometimes I want, get all in this, like, how do I word this? A lot of that time in my life of growing and unlearning and stuff, a lot of it wasn't this, like, I had this huge enlightening, profound, like, lightning bolt that hit me, and everything was just, like, again, so spiritual and so whatever. It was, like, out of desperation. I was so exhausted. I was so fed up with myself and, like, not being able to say no. I was desperate for, like, stability. I was, like, desperate for true connection. Like, I was just sick of the surface level bullshit of like, just the status quo of, like, what do you do? Like, I don't know. It was a lot of it was out of desperation. I was like, I just want to feel good. I felt like crap all the time, physically, mentally, all of that stuff. So it was just, like, finding these things that I knew that maybe in the moment, like, it was hard, but I knew that they were good for me. I knew that it was medicine for my spirit, So
Can I change the subject? We are learning in our journey of God tilling the soil in our hearts and our minds and our bodies, that the good news is we have a Father that loves us and he chases after us. He sent Jesus here to show us the way. Turn from your sin and follow me.
well, yeah, okay, so pause that though, because I just was talking to Jenna, and she started using this practice of, instead of saying sin, she says carelessness. Like, I think there's so much that word can easily be
It really just means missing the mark.
right. For me, coming back to like I guess my faith was finding different ways that like helped propel me to keep going into those areas of discomfort and of new land.
That whole place in you that's curious, God used words
Yeah,
to show you those things,
yeah,
or is using that.
totally. I mean, I think I think a lot of the words and the lingo I had growing up of just like the hyper religious stuff, it just was hard for me to connect. I think now, and even in that time whenever I was really coming back to my faith, I had this deeper desire to understand the origins of words and where they came from, because I had built so much um, biases and judgment around particular concepts.
What was that? What was that you said the other day?
Yeah, it was Ruach Elohim Chaim, which is the living spirit of God. And that's just something in my meditations. It just
Say that one more time.
Ruach Elohim Chaim. Ruach Elohim Chaim.
And what does it mean?
The spirit of the living God.
So you can look that up. You can, that's what Hillary uses. I use an ancient breath prayer, and I do that as a touchstone. I'm learning how to be an active listener with God the Father in a mode of silence and solitude and listening.
Let's do this. What would you say the biggest takeaways are for you, Dad, with resistance in the new ground?
One is there's always going to be resistance. Learn to accept that. We know the what and the why, and then learn how to resist resistance. And at the same time, to not fight that, but to embrace that as an act of love, as an act of intimacy, that God is wanting us to know him like he knows us. That's my takeaway. It's new. It's more clarity this week.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like, it's always, I just can overcomplicate everything. So I think simplifying, when we're talking about new grounds, like I think what I love about the metaphor of ground and connection to place is that like it can be very simple, simple concepts of, okay, like in my day, where do I feel furthest away from myself? In my day, like, what am I worshiping? That's a question. It's like we all worship something or someone. Like, what is it? That's a simple question. And it's like looking at the practicality part of it. Like, okay, where am I distracted the most? And the number one thing right now is my freaking phone. It's distracting me from the areas that I need to press into, of when I'm feeling stressed or isolated or lonely. It's like, okay, just go on my phone and get my little fix. So simplify, ask yourself questions from a place of curiosity, not criticism, and get rooted. What roots you? I think that, again, that's
a standalone question.
What roots you? What in your life do you need to let go of or invite that roots you?
We're trying to provoke thought.
I mean, this is where we're at. This is where we both are at. We're literally walking through. We still, even before filming this episode, we're like, okay, like, what are we doing? But we're starting to. One thing we decided to do, like last week, was we're going to start meeting regularly every once a week. There's something exciting about new ground. I think what's been cool for me is like my journey out of Port Angeles is now I'm in this phase of God and I finally like are putting the plans and the blueprints to work, and we're breaking out ground, and I'm actually building structure.
Yeah.
There's an actual what was happening below the ground, and then what was happening intangibly in our thoughts and in our imaginations are now being brought out into being manifested in this world, this tangible physical world.
None of this is easy. If it was easy, we'd all be doing it and the world would be a different place. Jesus even said, in life, you will have trials and tribulations, my paraphrase. But don't be afraid. Jesus said, don't be afraid a lot. Why did he say it?
Yeah.
Be of good courage.
Yeah. Good stuff, Dad.
Yeah. Seeing what God's doing in all of you gives me hope.
Cool. Thanks, Dad. Love you. Love you too.